I knew the body innately heals. It can't not.
A pocket of energy within myself.
This is for your mother. So just do this for her.
Let's figure out ways that we can actually use pleasure to come together and bring healing.
It's a modality where we go into your subconscious and change some of those limiting beliefs.
I'm Susan Marco, clinical hypnotist, and I have so many friends and people who have had big impact on my life. So I want to share them all with you. Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Trance Talks. This is Susan Marco. And, Trance Talks, we have conversations with practitioners across many different alternative modalities and disciplines. And today I am so excited to have Elizabeth Wallace here with me, who we've known each other for a few years now, and talk about alternative modalities or disciplines. Elizabeth is an intuitive animal communicator, a pet loss expert, and also certified grief educator. And I want to tell you, she's helped a couple of few people I know really navigate through that time of losing a pet, which, we all know sometimes even more, can be more painful than even losing our family. They are our family, right? So I could go down, no pun intended, I could go down a rabbit hole. But I'm going to just sit back and be quiet. And I'm going to ask you, Elizabeth. And first of all, thank you for being here.
Oh, I'm delighted. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. So tell our listeners, what do you do? What is an animal communicator?
Yeah, sure. So I talk to animals, basically. I can communicate with them in a way that they send me messages. It's all done telepathically. And the way that I receive the information most generally is through either imagery that they'll send me. They'll send me images, and then I interpret those images and translate them. And at this point, I've been doing it for so long and I've talked to so many animals. It happens once I'm kind of in that zone, it starts to happen and I don't even really know. It's like they're sending me the information and there are words coming out of my mouth and I'm not quite sure. I'm like, oh my gosh, wait, it just flows. And the other way is I can have actual conversations with them. Depends on the animal. Some animals will have an actual conversation. Most often it's a combination of both. And what is unique about what I do, Susan, is and I specialize in the area of grief and helping humans when it comes to that time for our animals to cross over. And I'll talk about that in a moment. But what's unique about what I do from most I'm going to say of other animal communicators. I don't want to say typical because it's really not a typical thing at all. But I have been shown that the animals are here as our guides and our teachers. And we have soul contracts with our animals the same way that we have soul contracts with our humans. And so what that means is anything that's happening in the animal's life or in their world, in behavioral illness, challenges you might be having with them. These are all in some way related to the messages that they want us to know and the ways that, excuse me, they are trying to help us on our path. And this is, to me, and it sort of, it evolved over time as I started doing this professionally. I can talk to any animal. I can talk to wildlife too. And we do have agreements with them as well. They're just what I call, small soul contracts as opposed to the ones that we choose to share our life with. But as I've been doing this work, I realized, and I just kept finding myself working with a lot of people who are grieving the loss of an animal or experiencing anticipatory grief, meaning that they've gotten a diagnosis or they recognize that the end of their animal's physical life is close, and so they're already experiencing that grief, thinking about what's going to happen when their animal's no longer here.
Mhm.
And it really can help to alleviate so much guilt and so much stress and so many unanswered questions when we can partner with the animal and the human and find a way to open those channels of communication.
Mhm.
And so I work with people predominantly. Again, I can do, if you're going to get a new puppy, I can help you with that. If your dog is all of a sudden started jumping a fence, I can help you with that too. But I want to focus today on the end of life work that I do, because I think that's a very sacred time in our animal's life and in our relationship with that animal. And we can really, there are so many nuggets of gold during that time, even though it's very sad, and even though we may be dreading that actual moment when it comes. And the other piece that I find, that animal communication really is so helpful with in those situations. Unlike with humans, we do generally make a decision to euthanize whether or not or when to euthanize our animals. And more often than not, people will at some point, if they share their lives with animals, be faced with making that decision.
Mhm.
And everybody has a different way in which to gauge an animal's quality of life. And there are all these scales that have been created in all these different ways. And it's very helpful for the human or humans to get the perspective of what the animal wants and wishes for. And there are animals who would prefer to go naturally, and that's usually tied to what they're trying to help their human with.
Mm.
So having the ability to communicate with them during that particular period of time can be very comforting for the humans and can really help to, I say it's a partnership, because it is really from the day that you bring them into your life. But we can do things like asking the animal, when you're ready to cross over, could you give us a clear and obvious sign? Right? And it's going to be something that they don't typically do. It's going to be something that you're not going to sit there and go, well, are they kind of on that? Sometimes they're on that blanket. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes it's going to be a clear and obvious sign. It's going to be something they're not normal. They're not prone to do. And the humans are able to say, okay, we either need to check back in with them, or we understand that this means that our animal is ready to cross over. And it really alleviates a lot of the guilt that people feel in questioning, did I go too early? Did I make the decision too late? I don't want them to suffer. Did I rob us of time? Was I selfish in keeping them here for too long because I wanted more time? And that complicates the grieving process in a way that it allows the human to judge themselves, right?
Yeah.
And that's never, in any situation, that never helps it moving through feelings and sitting with the grief. And so it really is a beautiful way to be able to bring the human and the animal together.
Mhm.
And ideally, I will work with somebody before their animal transitions, but I do connect with animals in spirit after they have crossed over into, they've left their physical body and they're in the spirit realm. It's just that I find that it alleviates a lot of suffering for the human if I can be involved prior to that event. Right?
Yeah.
It's no different for me. I'm trying to think of the top questions people always ask me. It's no different for me connecting to an animal in a physical body versus an animal in spirit, other than what I feel the communication part isn't different. The piece that's different is that I, number one, don't feel a physical body, because if they're in spirit, there's no physical body for me to connect with. And when an animal comes to me, if they are in a physical body, they appear on my right side. And if they're in spirit, they usually either appear above me, behind me, or on my left side. It's very rare that an animal in spirit appears on my right side. The only other difference is that I feel a lightness to an animal in spirit, sort of like a very airy, like they're free, they're floating. Whereas an animal in a physical body, I feel like I'm I'm connecting them with like something that's very grounded and dense.
Yeah.
But the actual communication doesn't differ. So yeah, I think that sort of gives folks an overview of what I do. And
I have a question that has been kind of floating through my mind as you're talking. Is this something that you've always been able to do, or did you cultivate this ability, or both?
yeah, it's a great question. Actually, it's both. So when I was very young, I always remember that I could talk to animals. I don't ever remember a time I couldn't hear them. And I thought everybody could. I didn't know that that was unique and that was a gift. And when I told my parents, it kind of freaked them out, because they thought we were going to get kicked out of the Catholic Church. Right? Like,
I bet.
oh, that was heresy. And then the other piece was the neighbors were going to think we were crazy, or that they had a crazy daughter. And what happened I'm going to say, happened pretty quickly. Over the course of probably a year, by the time I was 6, I had completely disconnected. I quite literally swallowed that, right? And interestingly enough, I started putting on a lot of weight as a little kid. And because that will disconnect you, right? It's sort of that full feeling in your body. It wasn't until now, I always was very intuitively drawn to animals, and I could figure out what was going on with them, and I had a connection with them that was above what a lot of people would always comment on it, right? Like, oh, you're so connected with animals, but I wasn't hearing them. I wasn't understanding them the way that I do now. And as an adult, this was 12, 14 years ago at this point, one of my soul animals was a dog named Olivia, she's just in spirit. And when she crossed over into spirit, it was a very profound loss for me. And that grief basically stripped away all of my defenses and all of the I guess the way I had closed myself down. And I started hearing her from spirit. And that allowed me to remember. She kind of brought me back to this time when I was talking to my family cat when I was 4 years old, and she's like, "You've always been able to talk to animals, you just forgot." And then it was like the floodgates opened, and I walk outside and the squirrels were talking to me, the chipmunks and the raccoons, and I was like, "Oh my God!" It's kind of like short circuiting, right? Because that's a lot of like too much noise all at once. So then I started seeking out, I didn't want to turn it off. I wanted to find out, how do I manage this and how do I hone this? And so I started seeking guidance from, I actually studied for quite some time with another, with a very well skilled and well honed animal communicator. And she really more taught me about how to manage my energy than anything else, right? And that's really the trick, is like, okay, when I don't want to connect in, like I don't have to go and do something that doesn't serve me well. I can intentionally say, no, I'm not gonna receive messages right now. So it was a combination of both. But I find I don't know, without having the guidance of how to navigate and manage it, that I would have been able to get to the point that I am now. because it was a lot. It was, it was, you know,
Yeah.
like, well, I have a message for you here. I'm like, okay.
What? So back to, well, first of all, thank you, Livia.
Mm,
Right? When you say, you know, our animals, you know, we are in relationship with them for us
right,
as much as for them.
right.
Right? So thank you to her for what she brought you
Mm.
to open that back up for you. That's so beautiful. But so logistically, like, how do you work with people?
So I work predominantly on Zoom or phone calls. It depends on the situation. I am physically present at a fair number of clients requested I be present when their animal is euthanized. And I do that on Zoom, and I'm able to explain, I can see the energy leaving the physical body, and I can explain that to the humans. And for anyone who thinks it's morbid, or it's because we as a culture have do not have a healthy relationship with death, or the death and dying process as we understand it. It's actually a very beautiful and peaceful experience to have. And the animals always, as they are departing their physical body, are always able to give something that is pertinent to the humans that I might not understand it, but it's meaningful to the humans, that can be comforting, right? And so it's yeah. So I can do that on Zoom. And I actually find even people that live physically in proximity to where I could see clients in person. There's actually Zoom allows me enough of a distance to be able to connect in and keep my energy managed so that I can be a clear channel. And when I'm in person, it's harder because we're in the same physical space. And especially when people are grieving, that's a really dense energy. And so it takes more energy for me to keep myself clear. So I can actually see more clients in a day if I do it on Zoom versus in person, if that makes sense.
That makes total sense to me.
Yeah.
And what I keep thinking about also as you're sharing all of this is that I recently had conversation with a death doula, which is, you know, essentially what you're doing for animals is, you know, ushering that process through so that the animal can actually leave more peacefully, feeling,
Right.
you know, more complete. And so that we as their humans can have that experience of dignity as well.
Right. Yeah.
I think that is just so beautiful and so needed, really.
Yeah. And it is a I look at that as a beautiful sacred ceremony that I get to be a part of. And it's you know, I have people that will say, God, that must be so depressing. And I'm like, well, it can be sad, right? Like there are times when of course I cry, and of course it's sad, and of course but it's not it's actually, to me, it's more beautiful than it is anything else, right? I mean, and sadness is tears are part of our human experience. But again, we're taught to, oh no, you don't want to feel those because those are scary or those are uncomfortable. And so it's once you get comfortable with it, it's actually beautiful to be with animals as they're about to cross over, especially because they don't have the fears that we have about death and dying. So they have a very different view about the whole process. And when you can be in the energy of that wisdom and that mindset that they have, that perspective, it really helps you. I mean, I had a very traditional view of death until everything happened with Olivia. And it really shifted how I looked at it. And she's like, I'm still here. That's one of the things, because when she came to me the first time, I got very cold, and I was meditating. I got very cold in my room, and I was holding her collar, and I felt her presence. And I said, God, it's almost like you're here. And she's like, I am still here. And they are. It's just it's in a different form, right? So.
Yeah, it's when you were talking about that, the density and the sadness, and that there's a big difference between feeling sad from a loss or feeling pain from a loss.
Mhm.
And I think what you're doing is actually alleviating the pain associated with it so that we can, I'm going to get emotional now. I've been thinking about it, so that we can like sit in that sadness.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
allow for that to pass through us, to have that experience.
Right.
Yeah.
And when we do that and we don't resist those feelings, they flow through us, and then it eases. And in acute grief, yes, you will get hit with another, I call them the tsunami waves of grief, but even that passes. And then eventually you realize, like, oh, I can sit with these feelings. I can be with this. I can just allow. It doesn't crush me. It doesn't destroy me, which is what most people are afraid will happen if they let themselves cry. Right. And actually what letting yourself cry means, you're much more likely to be balanced and more quickly. But again, that's, it's hard to undo all the centuries of taught people about emotions. But there is a profound beauty in the animals, and what they reveal during that time. And it's when I say it's an honor to deliver those messages to people, and to be a part of that, and that word doesn't even, like, I don't even have the vocabulary to do it justice, because it's just so profound. But it's
as many words as we have, sometimes our language doesn't cover it.
yeah.
So Elizabeth, what would you say is, like, what is the most, I don't know, not really most common, but like what is the general thing that you want pet owners to know about? I mean, as if you haven't covered it already, but like, is there a common thread that?
Yeah. So what I would want pet owners to know, or pet guardians, as I would call them, right?
Yeah, thank you.
Is really that there's no mistake that the animal that's with you is with you. There's never any mistake in the animals that come to us and that are with us. And as a matter of fact, I have clients that we just went and they just met a dog today because they want to get a second dog. And they looked at this dog 2 months ago, and then they stopped. We just assumed the dog got adopted. And I said, look, if this is the right dog for you, it will, you can't stop it from happening. And I have seen proof of this so many times that they really are, the ones that are with us are meant to be with us because they have a purpose with us. And so I would want pet guardians to know that it would serve them. It would be great to, I would really invite them to be curious about the things that their animals do that might be an annoyance or might be challenging, because there's a lot of hidden wisdom in that, right? And I'll give you a perfect example. I have a golden retriever who came after Olivia and is the antithesis of all things golden retriever. This is not the dog I expected, not the dog I wanted, she is nothing like any golden retriever. I was supposed to have a dog from the earlier litter, but that whole set of circumstances prevented that from happening. And Charlotte will bark the type of bark, not like once or twice. It's sort of like that piercing, like I'm gonna make you stab your eyes and run off a cliff because I just can't get her to stop. And it took me a little bit of time, but this was right around the time when I was starting to look at doing this professionally. And I was scared and I was hiding, and I was not, you know, physically hiding, but hiding from my gifts and what I was doing. And Charlotte wouldn't stop barking. And what I realize now is that her purpose with me, I mean, there's a couple purposes she's here with me, but one of them is to help me make sure I'm connected with my voice. And if I'm not, she's going to emulate what that looks like for me in a very annoying way, I might add. But I love her dearly for it, because now when she does that, I go, where am I not speaking up? Where am I not using my voice the way I'm meant to? And so that is what I would want you to know, is that those things that you're going like, oh my God, why is this dog doing this? And I can't, oh my God, I can't stand it. Or like, I can't believe, like, this is not the dog that I thought I was going to get, or this is not the horse. Like, I wanted an easy horse and I've got a challenging horse. If you can come out of the frustration or the overwhelm or whatever emotion you're feeling and sort of like zoom out and look at the big picture and say, I'm going to be curious about what this could be and what they might be trying to tell me, because I can promise you they're trying to tell you something.
Love that.
Yeah.
Thank you. So how do people find you?
So they can find me on my website, which is elizabethwallace.com. I'm also on same name on Facebook, and on Instagram, it is the Pet Whisperer.
The Pet Whisperer.
Yes.
Fantastic. So
Yeah.
all of that will be in the show notes for you all.
Awesome.
So yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with
Thank
me
you.
today.
I'm so grateful to be able to talk about this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you for all that you do, because I know that you're bringing so much ease and comfort and wisdom to people in the midst of, a difficult time. And
Thank
for that, you really are an angel, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's
Take
so great
care.
to talk to you.
Yeah. See you guys.